And here with reaction is John Vick, the Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. John, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Riley. It's great to be here.
So I want to start by saying this. Thank you for your service, and to those who've fought for this country, those who are fighting right now, and everybody that will fight for us in the future. America is a very special place, and it's worth fighting for. So I want to start by saying thank you.
Thank you very much for saying so. It certainly is worth fighting for.
So moving on, look, the government is $37 trillion in debt. It's a real problem. So I totally understand the logic behind making spending cuts. But I do wonder when it comes to the VA if we should be maybe a little bit careful here, because this is already a troubled agency. And if anybody doesn't deserve to see these cuts, I think it's veterans. So again, I love DOGE and what they've done. We definitely need aggressive spending cuts in Washington, but I'm not sure we should be starting with the VA.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty nuanced issue. One of the common themes when I talk to members of Congress, pretty much everybody agrees that we're willing to spend the money to meet our commitments to veterans. It's really just how that money is spent. I mean, for me, one of the really intriguing things is when you look at from 2017, so this is a bipartisan point.
Yes.
If you look at from 2017 until now, I mean, you saw almost a 30% increase in cost growth to run the VA, even while the population of veterans is declining. So you're spending a lot more money for veteran outcomes that are not necessarily where they need to be. And so when I look at potential cuts, whether it's at the VA or any other part of government, I look at the bureaucracy and making sure, yes, we're spending the money, but making sure that those dollars that are meant for veterans actually go to veterans. I think that if you put any group of smart people in a room, veterans or otherwise, there's not a single person that would say the VA would look the way it does right now if you could build it from the ground up. Now, we can't do that. We can't rebuild the entire institution. But what we can do is start to shape it the way that other modern, successful organizations or healthcare systems work, where you streamline services around the core capabilities that veterans need to get the care that they deserve, that they've earned, right? And so what I think is ultimately the purpose of this is to find a more efficient way to get that balance of VA care and community care, so that the distance between point A and point B for a veteran, whether it's a vaccine or like a flu shot or a heart transplant, right? What you need is the best possible outcome for that veteran. We are spending the money to do that as a country. It's just been a factor of how do you measure success? We should measure success by successful patient outcomes, not by how many dollars that we're throwing at it, right? And so what my hope, and I've talked to Secretary Collins about this as well, is that regardless of the shape of the reforms, we're making sure that whatever cuts, whatever additions, whatever changes are made, improve veteran outcomes.
So I'd like to hear more about that conversation with Collins, and really just about your perspective here. So let's say, we're having a conversation about, reforming the VA. Where do we start? Where's the best starting point?
Sure. Well, I think community care, and I know that's very important to Secretary Collins as well.
But for us, for civilians out there in layman's terms, what does that really look like and mean for vets?
Yeah. So when I say community care, that means that you can go down the street to your doctor and get the services that you need, right? The same providers that your spouse uses, that your kids probably use. Historically, the VA has sort of siloed veteran care. And there are some places, I live in Orlando, by the way. I have a few different options to use the VA if I want to. That is not the case for most veterans, especially rural veterans, right? Also, keep in mind the VA was established at a time when most people didn't live 15 minutes away from an urgent care or a minute clinic. Those things didn't exist, a long time ago. So when we're talking about what does right look like, it's determining what services a veteran needs and where those services exist. Should they drive 2 hours to Billings, Montana to get that flu shot, or should they be able to go down the street and the VA is going to cover the cost for that? There's a lot of preventative services too, in terms of improving outcomes. If you're asking a veteran to sort of bend over backwards and jump over a lot of hurdles just to be able to get preventive care, well, then they're not going to go to a doctor until they're really sick. That's how one, it makes it a lot more expensive, but you also lose a lot more veterans that way too.
Okay. I do want to pivot then also to the VA's handling of veterans dealing with PTSD. In your experience and from what you've seen, how is the VA's track record on addressing PTSD?
Pretty abysmal because of the wait times. But the Veterans Access Act, it's a really critical piece of legislation that solidifies these community care options for veterans, but also has a really important pilot program covering substance abuse and mental health.
Mm,
The critical thing or the big disconnect when you're handling PTSD, it's the same as any other form of mental health issue or substance abuse issue, which is very personal for the veteran, for any person. And when somebody reaches that window where they're ready to get help, especially if it's a long running issue, and you have a lot of post 9/11 veterans that deal with this stuff, that window where they're willing to get help could be a day, could be a weekend, right? Could be after an intervention. Well, if you're using the VA, sometimes you'll go ask for help and they'll say, well, we can see you in 28 days or we can see you in
wow.
2 months. Well, that veteran might be dead by then,
Yes.
right? And we've seen for the past 10 years that I've been working on veterans issues, it's heartbreaking whenever you hear about a veteran who takes their life in the parking lot of a VA facility. So what this legislation does, the Veterans Access Act, it'll make sure that whether you're going to a VA facility or an urgent care or wherever, CVS Health for all I care, wherever you can start your journey to get better, VA is going to be there and cover that. I think that's going to save a lot of lives, and I also think you're going to find that being able to go down the street and get care that's close to you is probably not going to be as expensive long run as all of these wait times, funding all this bureaucracy and overhead. At the end of the day, again, spend the dollars. Just get the dollars to patient outcomes, to veteran outcomes as fast as you can.
Well, so to your point, I think it's wait time certainly, but also treatment method. From what I've heard as a civilian, but from what I've heard from people who have served, usually there's a heavy incentive to just get you onto some kind of prescription pill. You come back from battle, you've seen horrible things, things that nobody should ever have to see. You've lived through extreme trauma, and it's difficult to transition back to civilian life here in America. And yet a doctor will come to you and say, maybe the best way and only way to address your pain and your real trauma is to put you on pills. I don't know about you, John, but I do think we could do a little bit better because that's a way to maybe numb the pain, but you're not really getting to the core of the issue for them.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, this is one of those, again, veterans are people
Yes.
and people are different. To be clear, there
Yes.
are some veterans that prefer to go to the VA where they're surrounded by other veterans
Okay.
and seek mental health care there. There are just as many veterans that it's very personal, it's very private. Maybe they feel insecure about seeking mental health treatment in the first place. That's the last place they want to go.
Sure.
So, regardless of the treatment modalities, what you want to do is make that care and that journey to getting better as accessible as you possibly can. And when you give veterans more options, you save a lot of veterans' lives.
Okay. Now, speaking of saving veterans' lives here, one final issue I want to raise: homeless veterans in America. We have tens of thousands of homeless vets on the streets of this country. Some estimates say it could be 20,000, some say it could be 30,000, but it's still a huge issue nonetheless. I want to get your thoughts about what you think we could do to really address that problem, because I can't think of a bigger form of betrayal than someone who fights for this country, puts their life on the line just to come back home and live on the streets of it. That to me is, it's just heartbreaking, and I think we can do a whole lot better as a country for them.
Yeah, this is an issue that my organization has certainly thought a lot about, and it's
Okay.
pretty multifaceted. I think, well, for one, mental health is certainly an issue with regard to veteran homelessness as well. But I think
Yes.
where we've seen really the best outcomes are when you have whole of community efforts, where instead of making one particular government program,
Mm.
you make centers, resource centers, basically, that tie all these things in together. And that is very community dependent. So our organization exists all over the country. And as I've traveled around talking to our staff, talking to our volunteer groups, I get to tour a lot of these facilities, which, are really works of God, right? I mean, you have people that care enough about these issues, that care enough about veterans, where if you can get a vet to a particular place, you can connect them with housing resources. You can connect them to the local AA program. You can connect them to the Baptist church down the street that also focuses on this stuff. That's different for every community. But the more often you can have these centers of resources and support for veterans, that especially long-term homeless veterans, that is a tough cycle to break. And it takes a lot of individualized attention. And very rarely is there one government program or resource that will get somebody off the street long term.
I hear you. I do. So just to wrap things up then, for people who want to support your organization and learn more about what you guys do, where can they go?
Yeah, our website, cv4a.org, cv, the number 4a.org. That's a really great resource center for what CVA does. It goes into how to get involved. It goes into the legislation that we're supporting, including the Veterans Access Act, and whether you can give 30 seconds to fire off a letter to a member of Congress, or you want to come and work with us, helping us to make phone calls and knock doors in their districts, we'll hook you up.
Okay. And look, as we conclude this special Independence Day coverage, I just want to say again, thank you to all of those brave souls out there who have fought, who are fighting now, and who will fight, because that's what keeps us independent and free. And I just want us all to remember the real reason for the season. I do. So yes, I like fireworks and backyard barbecues, going to the beach, hanging out with family and friends, but let's remember why we're able to do that today. So John, thank you for your service, and thank you for serving those who serve us too.
Thank you for saying so. Grateful to be on.
Absolutely.